What's up, Podfic Listeners? I'm back with Chapter 6 to Life is Rough, but I'm so fortunate to have met you. For a long while, all Shota knew were swirling lights and sirens. He could feel cold sweat dripping all over him, and hands were pressing against his neck and wrist and torso. A hand pressed particularly hard against his rib cage, and Shota bit back a groan. Someone said his name, but it wasn't anyone he knew. Actually, he didn't know anyone who was surrounding him. But if he was in an ambulance, surely Hisashi would be with him, unless he'd been injured on patrol. But then again, no, it hadn't been patrol, it had been Izuku. Shota coughed out, attempting to sit up. Zashi and Izu. Mr. Aizawa, please lay down. A paramedic spoke sternly to him. You're injured and we're trying to take care of you, okay? If there were any rules that had been hammered into Shota in his time attending UA, it was to listen to the goddamn paramedics because they knew what they were doing better than you. And so, despite his brain screaming at him, run, find Hisashi, find Izuku, protect my family. Shota laid back down on the cot, coughing up more blood, and tried to focus on the paramedic's voice. Ultimately, he failed, and finally, he passed out. Hisashi and Izuku slept straight through the morning into the early afternoon. It was only when Izuku started making little nightmare-induced whimpers earning loud whines from Teddy that Hisashi began to awaken. Speaking in gentle, soothing tones, Hisashi stirred his kid awake, earning a teary-eyed look from the boy. Hisashi crooned and ran a hand through Izuku's hair, saying softly, Why don't you go grab something from the snack cabinet, okay, kiddo? I've got to make a few phone calls. The call with Shota's mother's was longer than it should have been, what with Yumi demanding answers to her son's condition that Hisashi didn't have. Fortunately, Michiko was able to rein her wife in and told Hisashi to call them back when he'd seen Shota. The call to work was the most brief of all the calls he made, seeing as how Nezu already knew everything that went down everywhere and with everyone, especially his employees. Nezu told Hisashi to take the next few days off, and that he would take care of Shota's responsibilities, whatever that meant. Hisashi didn't know and didn't want to know. His phone call with Tsukuuchi told Hisashi only the barest of details, the detective instead leaving anything beyond he's alive and out of surgery for Hisashi to discover when they got to the hospital. And so with a sigh, Hisashi walked to the kitchen, absolutely melting at the sight of Izuku sucking down a jelly pouch. Grape, Shota's favorite flavor, and crouched in front of his child. Hey, kiddo, the man began. I need you to run next door to grab some proper clothes. But Hisashi stopped short upon seeing Izuku's utterly horrified face. Izu? Kiddo? What? Don't leave me, Papa, Izuku stuttered out, choking on a sob. Please, don't make me leave. Shh, sweetheart, Hisashi crooned, holding his arms out for Izuku to leap into. The child burrowed his face in Hisashi's shoulder, and the man rocked him gently. I'm not leaving you, okay? Let's head over together and get you some clothes. We've got to get dressed so we can go see Daddy, right? Right, Izuku sniffled, nodding his head firmly. And wasn't that something Hisashi loved about his kid? Izuku's determination and drive that managed to power past his paralyzing fear and anxiety. The kid was always ready to help others, although Hisashi wouldn't rest until others turned to others and himself. After letting Teddy out to use the bathroom and feeding all of their pets, sending Namari a quick text to run over and please let Teddy out in the morning, because Hisashi had a feeling they'd be spending the night at the hospital. Hisashi turned and allowed Izuku to lead the way towards the neighboring apartment, and Izuku seemed nervous. It was a different kind of nervous than Hisashi had seen from the boy before. This kind of nervous wasn't about fear of physical punishment, it was more fear of judgment. Izuku looked like Hisashi was going to tease him or be verbally cruel, which Hisashi was not going to stand for. Hey, kiddo. Hisashi stopped Izuku short from the front door. He had half a mind to ask Izuku if the boy wanted him to wait outside, but seeing as how the idea of leaving Izuku had gone earlier, you know I love you, right? And I'm not going to judge you for anything that's beyond your control, okay? Izuku's shoulders relaxed, and the boy nodded. Yeah, okay, Papa. He nodded, reaching up to unlock the door to the apartment that Hisashi had nightmares about. And really, Hisashi had expected more. Maybe he'd expected it to be dirtier or bug-infested or burnt to a crisp. But he hadn't expected it to look so bare. The first thing Hisashi noticed was the lack of anything. There was no TV, no couch, no coffee or side tables. There were no cushions or photos on the walls or anything to make the apartment seem homey. A quick glance into the kitchen while Izuku was shutting the front door spoke volumes. There were empty beer bottles in the trash and on the countertop, along with a stack of mail that looked like overdue bills. Moving through the hallway with Izuku leading him by the hand, Hisashi glanced around and noted that the bathroom and master bedroom were both empty as well. Not to forget, there was a musty scent that filled the apartment as though it had been unused for months on end, perhaps even years. It all filled Hisashi with a sense of dread. Upon reaching Izuku's bedroom, a simple All Might-themed plaque on the door reading the boy's name in a child's handwriting, Hisashi's heart crashed into his stomach when he saw inside. There were a few blankets and a lone, long, flattened pillow lying in the corner of the room, away from the windows where the heat of summer would seep through. Izuku's bright yellow backpack took up another corner, along with a spread of analysis papers and pens and homework. A pile of clothing was stacked next to the backpack, most looking either too wrinkled or overworn. Finally, there was also a single plush toy residing next to the makeshift cot. It was a cat-shaped toy that Shouta had found at the checkout lane at the supermarket and had thoughtlessly tossed into their basket to buy for Izuku. It was the only toy that Izuku had. Oh, sweetheart, Hisashi murmured near silently to himself as Izuku went over to the pile of clothes, looting around for a particular shirt. He must have found what he was looking for because the ghost of a smile crossed over Izuku's features and he tugged a bright green Put Your Hands Up radio t-shirt from the stack. A bright green t-shirt that Hisashi had brought home from work for him, having extra merch that hadn't all sold yet, and thinking that Izuku may like it. The things they'd given to their child so thoughtlessly, a cat toy, a t-shirt, and here was all Izuku had. Kiddo, Hisashi began again, speaking a little louder. How long has it been since your dad's been home? Izuku flinched. It was a full-body motion that ripped a hole through Hisashi's already wounded heart. The boy began. And then quietly, I don't know. Izuku sniffled, rubbing at his eyes, and said, the lady at the office said that he hadn't paid her money for our home, so she needed it, the money. But I don't have any money, and I Izuku's breath was picking up at a dangerous rate, so Hisashi moved in a flash to be right in front of his kid. He worked the child through a breathing exercise, murmuring soothingly to the boy as he stroked Izuku's curls. It's okay, kiddo. We can talk about this more later, yeah? When we're with Daddy. Izuku gave the most pitiful, okay, that Hisashi had ever heard. Once Izuku was dressed, Hisashi hefted the boy onto his hip and kissed his forehead, taking the child out of that dreaded hellhole and back to their home. Their home, because it wasn't just Hisashi's and Shota's apartment anymore. Looking back, Hisashi supposed they needed more than a new dog to fill the hole that was in their house. A child was what they were missing, and Hisashi and Shouta had lucked out. They'd gotten the best one. In the end, Hisashi decided to wait on the conversation about Izuku's living situation until Shouta was a little more healed. Because when they got to the hospital, Shouta was barely lucid with the painkillers and healing quirks he'd been subjected to. He was even loopy enough to give Hisashi a loud, resounding kiss on the cheek that had Izuku in a fit of giggles. Due to the healing quirks Shota had been placed under, he was cleared merely 2 days after he'd been injured. Hisashi had, of course, agreed to allow Izuku to miss school that Monday to see Shota home. He was, after all, able to make that decision now, being one of Izuku's legal guardians. It was only thanks to Tsukuuchi's pull that they were able to get the adoption paperwork so quickly. Hisashi, with input from his husband, filled out all of the necessary papers to make sure Izuku could come home with them that very Monday. He also called their apartment complex and told their landlord that the Midoriya place needed to be condemned and the locks replaced, briefly giving the woman the shallowest of explanations that he and Shota had taken on their young neighbor. The woman had spouted, "Good, Lord knows his father is a deadbeat," to which Hisashi had readily agreed. After a few more phone calls to Nomeri, to Tensei, to Michiko and Yumi, and to Hisashi's own family, Izuku was finally a part of their little family. Now there was only one more matter to be settled. "So, Izu," Hisashi exclaimed with a wide grin as he finished the last of the paperwork, only one line blank. "There's one more thing we need to take care of." From his position sitting on the hospital bed next to Shota, the man's arm slung around the child lazily as he read a book, and Izuku peeled apart a baby orange. Izuku looked up curiously. "What, Papa?" Shota choked a little at that, still not used to hearing it from Izuku. Hisashi himself could only grin even wider back at his child. "Your name," Hisashi cheered. "Your last name, to be precise." Izuku tilted his head to the side, clearly confused. "What about it?" Shota rolled his eyes, nudging Izuku gently and speaking softly. "You're allowed to change it if you want." "Yeah, to Aizawa Yamada or Yamada Aizawa." Hisashi waggled his eyebrows, making Izuku giggle. "Or even just Aizawa or just Yamada." "Only if you want to," Shota quickly amended. "There's no pressure to change it if you don't want to." Frowning down at the peels of orange in his lap, Izuku chewed over the piece in his mouth silently. For a moment, there was only the sound of Hisashi's tapping foot and the turning of a page in Shota's book. And then, so quietly, so unsurely, Izuku spoke. What about Yamazawa?" And oh, Shota thought to himself, maybe this feeling is what Hisashi was talking about. Because Aizawa Yamada and Yamada Aizawa are too big, and I don't wanna have just one of your names. So, sounds perfect, sweetheart, Hisashi crooned, writing the last name down with a flourish. He very well wished he and Shota could change their last names as well, but what with their relationship being on the down low, especially from their gossipy students, it wouldn't do well for them to have the same surname. Izuku's shrieking giggles drew Hisashi away from the paperwork, and he melted when he saw Shota tickling the boy's ribs with a finger. "Daddy," Izuku shrieked. "Stop it. It tickles." Dutifully, Shota stopped, leaving Izuku's little chest heaving with heavy breaths and the remnants of laughter. Hisashi's grin could have split his face, and even Shota was sporting a smile. A knock on the door drew their attention, and a nurse poked his head in. He was a nice young man with the type of fish quirk that gave him fins on either side of his head, and Izuku had adored drilling the man for information on his gills and lungs and how the rest of his quirk worked. All of which the nurse answered patiently as he tended to Shota, earning the approval from Izuku's guardians. "Ready to bust out of here?" the nurse inquired, smiling at Izuku's chirping affirmative response. "Okay then, let me get the wheelchair." Getting home was easy enough, what with Nomeri picking them up and dropping them off. The woman gushed over each and every little thing Izuku did, and Shota proclaimed of a headache halfway home, earning a glare from said woman. She turned to Izuku and chided, "Your daddy is such a stick in the mud." "No, he's not," Izuku retorted obstinately. He's the best. He's nice and funny, and he's my favorite hero." "What?" Hisashi exclaimed, only Shota's red-eyed glare keeping his voice non-quirked. "Little listener, why?" Hisashi pretend sobbed, earning an eye roll from his husband and a damp giggle from Izuku. Izuku's answer was so quiet that the adults in the car almost missed it. He fights Quirkless. Hizashi's heart softened, and he exchanged a glance with his husband over Izuku's head. Shouta looked contemplative and confused, and Hisashi signed to him, "Later, babe," to which the man nodded. The rest of the car ride was filled with Namuri sobbing over Izuku's cuteness and Hisashi singing to the radio. Shouta proclaimed a headache once more, even as he smiled down into his shirt collar. Izuku pressed up against him contentedly. When they finally got home, their entire family collapsed onto the master room's king-size bed, allowing all three of their pets to hop up with them. Shouta and Hisashi were flanking Izuku on either side, the child wrapping a hand around both of their shirts as he quickly succumbed to sleep. Teddy curled up against their feet while Spork settled on Shota's pillow, right above his head like a hat, and Bastard curled up in the nook of Hisashi's drawn-up knees. Carding his fingers through Shota's hair, Hisashi leaned forward and gently kissed his husband. "I love you, Sho," he spoke quietly, earning the softest of smiles back from Shouta. "Love you too, Zashi." Shouta was awoken from his sleep by a violent knock on the door. Glancing over at the alarm clock, he glared harshly when he noticed it was 2 a.m. But the knock came again, even more violent and loud than before, and Shouta quickly turned to make sure Izuku hadn't woken up. He was unconcerned about Hisashi, knowing his husband wouldn't be able to hear the knocking without his hearing aids. But Izuku was blessedly still asleep, likely exhausted from the anxiety and excitement from the past few days. Dragging himself out of bed and wrapping his capture scarf around his neck, Shouta made his way towards the front door as quickly as his drug-addled and injured body would let him. Glancing through the peephole, he could only see darkness. With a frown, Shouta gripped his capture weapon in one hand, hidden behind the door as he tugged it open a fraction. There, in front of him, stood a man with dark curly hair and lightly tanned skin. He had freckles over his cheeks and a glazed, drunken look in his eyes. Shota's gaze narrowed, because for the first time ever, he was meeting Hisashi Midoriya. Alright guys, that is the conclusion of Chapter 6. So life is rough, but I'm so fortunate to have met you. I have a couple things to say about this. One, Izuku is 9 years old. How are they carrying him on their hips? I mean, I don't have any kids, and it's been a pretty fat minute since I've, been around kids and was able to remember their age, their height, and everything. But I'm struggling to think about how somebody can carry a 9-year-old on their hip. And also, second, fuck Hisashi Midoriya, for real. How could he have Izuku living like that? If I could throw hands with that man, I would. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. So leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if I am up your alley on Voices of Podfics. If not, it was nice seeing you, or nice having you on my channel for this episode, or this series if you guys are listening to it. And just have a good day, guys. Drink water, eat food, stay safe.